A lone cowboy saves two lost Apache girls from the deadly desert, but the next morning their mother arrives with a mysterious silver pendant, promising it will protect him when the time comes. What danger is on the horizon? Watch till the end to find out, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Wild West tales. Let's get started. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, the horizon shimmering like a mirage. The dry wind carried with it the smell of dust and sage, whispering secrets only the land understood. Cowboy Jake Turner rode slowly along a narrow trail, his hat tilted low to shield his eyes from the blinding glare. His horse's hooves kicked up small clouds of sand with every step. He'd been riding since dawn, checking the far reaches of his grazing land, when movement near a cluster of rocks caught his attention. Narrowing his eyes, Jake pulled the reins, his sharp instincts telling him something wasn't right. As he approached, the shapes became clearer. Two small figures crouched low against the rock face. They were young Apache girls, their faces streaked with dust and fear. One clutched the other's hand tightly, her gaze fixed on something in the sand. Jake's eyes followed theirs, and he saw it. A rattlesnake, thick and coiled, its rattle buzzing like a sinister warning. The heat shimmered around it, making the danger seem even more surreal. Jake didn't hesitate. His hand went to the lasso at his side in a single, fluid motion, years of ranch work guiding his aim. The rope sailed through the air and tightened just behind the snake's head, jerking it clean off the ground. The rattler writhed and hissed, but Jake swung it wide and hurled it deep into the desert scrub, far from the girls. For a moment, the only sound was their heavy breathing and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. The girls looked at him with wide, unblinking eyes, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. Jake knew they couldn't understand his words, but he tipped his hat slightly in reassurance. A rescue didn't always need language. Sometimes it was just action. Jake slid down from his saddle, moving slowly so as not to startle them. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, offering it to the older girl first. She hesitated, glancing at her younger companion, before taking a cautious sip. The water seemed to bring a hint of life back into their faces. The younger one accepted next, drinking quickly, before Jake gently took the canteen back. He gestured toward the shadow cast by his horse, encouraging them to rest there. The sun was dipping lower now, but the heat still pressed down like a weight on their small shoulders. They sat quietly, the older girl holding the younger close, her hand smoothing the tangled hair from her sister's face. Jake studied them, wondering how far they'd come. Their clothes were dusty and worn, their feet bare and blistered. He could tell they'd been walking for hours, maybe even days. He didn't ask questions. Out here, survival often came before stories. What mattered now was getting them to safety before nightfall brought coyotes, snakes, and cold winds. Jake refilled his horse's water trough from the canteen, letting the animal drink before preparing for the journey back to his ranch. When the time came to leave, Jake extended a hand to the older girl. She hesitated again, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, but finally took it. He lifted her onto his horse, seating her behind the saddle, then scooped the younger one up and placed her in front of him. The older girl's arms wrapped protectively around her sister's waist, and Jake could feel the tension in their small bodies. He spoke softly, even though he knew they couldn't understand his words, hoping his tone would carry the meaning, "You're safe now." With a light tap of his heel, the horse began the slow trek toward home. The trail wound through dry gullies and rocky outcroppings, the fading light casting long shadows across the land. Jake kept his eyes scanning the terrain, wary of danger. The girls stayed silent the whole way, their heads resting lightly against him as if exhaustion had finally taken over. As the sky shifted to deep orange and purple, his ranch came into view, a modest spread with a small wooden house, a corral, and a weathered barn. Smoke curled from the chimney where he'd left a low fire burning before heading out. The sight brought him a quiet sense of relief. When they arrived, Jake dismounted first and gently lifted the younger girl down, then helped her sister to the ground. He led them inside, where the air was cooler and the scent of stew lingered from the morning. He motioned for them to sit at the table, then ladled steaming broth into tin bowls. They ate slowly at first, then faster as hunger got the better of them. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching them. They didn't know him, and he didn't know them. But there was a strange, unspoken trust forming in that small room. After dinner, Jake found 2 clean blankets and spread them out on the floor near the fireplace. The girls curled up together, the younger one asleep almost instantly. The older girl's eyes stayed open a little longer, studying him quietly from across the room. When their gazes met, she gave the smallest of nods, a silent acknowledgement, maybe even gratitude. Jake returned the gesture before settling into his own chair by the fire. Outside, the desert night grew cold, but inside there was warmth enough for all 3. Jake knew tomorrow would bring questions. Where had they come from? Was someone out there looking for them? But tonight, those questions could wait. Tonight, there was only the quiet crackle of the fire, the soft breathing of 2 children who had been spared from danger, and the steady heartbeat of a man who, without thinking twice, had decided that saving them was the only thing that mattered. Sometimes that was reason enough. The morning sun had just begun to climb over the jagged horizon when Jake stepped outside, the cool desert air still clinging to the earth before the day's heat took over. His boots crunched lightly on the sand as he carried a bucket of water to the trough. Inside the house, the 2 Apache girls still slept, curled under their blankets like small desert foxes. He thought about waking them for breakfast, but something in the distance caught his attention. A faint, rhythmic sound, steady as a heartbeat. Hoofbeats. Jake paused, narrowing his eyes toward the trail leading from the east. From beyond a rise, a lone rider emerged, framed against the golden glow of morning. She rode with a straight back, her long dark hair loose and gleaming in the light. Even at a distance, Jake could feel the weight of her presence. This was no ordinary traveler. As she drew closer, he noticed the beadwork on her clothing, each stitch a mark of skill and tradition. Her horse moved with controlled power, its mane flowing like black water. When she reached the yard, she slowed to a halt, her gaze locking on Jake with a calm intensity that made him straighten unconsciously. She dismounted in one fluid motion, her boots landing silently on the ground. Without a word, she walked toward him, her eyes flicking briefly toward the house where her daughters still rested. Jake nodded toward the door in silent acknowledgement. The woman's gaze softened for just a moment, but then returned to its steady, unreadable calm. She carried something in her hands, a bundle wrapped tightly in deer hide, the leather worn but well kept. Standing just a few steps away from him now, she extended the bundle without ceremony, as if the gesture alone explained everything. Jake accepted it carefully, feeling the unexpected weight of the package. The deer hide was tied with a strip of sinew, and when he loosened it, the bundle fell open to reveal a silver pendant. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, intricately carved with swirling patterns that seemed to shift in the sunlight. In the center was a small, smooth stone, the color of storm clouds, set into the metal as if it had always belonged there. Jake turned it over in his hands, his fingers tracing the delicate engravings, wondering how many generations it had passed through before reaching him. "For saving my daughters," the woman said, her voice low but steady. The words carried a weight far beyond their simplicity. Jake glanced up, meeting her eyes. There was gratitude there, but also something else, a depth he couldn't quite read. "It will protect you when the time comes." Her tone held neither urgency nor comfort, yet the words lingered in the air like smoke. Jake felt a faint chill despite the warmth of the sun on his back. He had heard of Apache tokens of protection before, but he had never been given one. He opened his mouth to thank her, but the words stuck. Instead, he simply nodded, tucking the pendant carefully into his palm. He wanted to ask what she meant, what the time was, and why he would need protecting. But something in her expression told him the answer would not come easily. She stepped back, lifting her chin slightly, and for the first time Jake noticed the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes. She had likely ridden far to reach him, perhaps tracking her daughter's path through the desert all night. Inside the house, the sound of soft footsteps broke the stillness. The older girl peeked out from behind the doorframe, her eyes widening as she saw her mother. A flicker of recognition lit her face, and then she was running across the yard, her younger sister right behind her. The woman dropped to one knee, wrapping both girls in her arms with a quiet fierceness. No tears, no dramatic reunion. Just the deep, steady embrace of a mother who had feared the worst and now held the proof of their safety. Jake stood back, feeling like a silent witness to something sacred. When the girls finally stepped away, the woman looked back at Jake, the pendant still clutched in his hand. "Keep it close," she said simply. Her voice was almost a whisper, but it carried like wind over stone. Then she mounted her horse in one smooth motion, her daughters climbing up behind her. Jake noticed that she didn't look back as she turned toward the horizon. It wasn't coldness. It was the way of someone who believed that goodbyes were unnecessary when the bond was already understood. Jake stood there long after the sound of hoofbeats faded, the silver pendant catching the morning light in his palm. He couldn't shake her words. "It will protect you when the time comes." He wondered if it was meant for physical danger, the kind he faced often in the untamed land, or something deeper, something unseen. The patterns on the pendant seemed almost alive, drawing his thoughts inward. Maybe it was superstition, or maybe there truly was power in the old ways, power he had never understood until now. Later that day, as the sun climbed high and the heat rolled in waves across the sand, Jake hung the pendant on a leather cord and slipped it over his head. The cool weight of it against his chest felt grounding, almost as if it had found the place it was meant to rest. Every so often he would catch his hand drifting toward it, his fingers brushing the smooth stone in the center. He didn't know what kind of time the woman had meant, but deep down he knew the desert had a way of testing a man without warning. That night, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the old barn. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their calls echoing off the cliffs. Jake sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out into the moonlit expanse. The pendant felt warm now, though he hadn't been in the sun for hours. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, but the steady weight of it was impossible to ignore. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the firelight, danger could be waiting. And if the woman's words were true, he might one day find out exactly what this strange reward was meant to guard him from.